Hello and welcome to today's Wired briefing on unlocking hidden value in network data. My name's Amit Katwala. I'm a senior editor at Wired UK, and in this briefing, we'll be exploring how telecom companies are sitting on a data goldmine and how technologies such as artificial intelligence can be used to find new value in network data that goes beyond the obvious. We'll explore some examples where businesses have unlocked value within their network data and look at how telecoms companies can create a new ecosystem around their networks. I'm delighted to be joined today by Eddie Short, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Virgin Media O2, and Kayur Rughani, the Managing Director for Accenture Analytics. Eddie, Kayur, welcome. It's so great to have you with us today. And before we start, Kayur would like to say a few words about Accenture's work in this area.
Thanks, Amit. So, as you say, so one of the things that we do in Accenture in applied intelligence is really to sort of help companies through complicated transformations, particularly around data and AI. And of course, this is an ever-changing world, and ultimately the transformation doesn't really stop. It sort of just moves and changes phase. My experience has really been in the comms and media industry, working with clients like O2 and people like Eddie, taking the clients through this journey. And in most of our clients, particularly in telcos, are sort of up against a bit of a repivoting type of moment right now. For years and years, the mobile and the communications industry is now at the center of our hearts, in our lives. All of us have mobile phones. We're absolutely reliant on all of our connectivity, and the services that we use are sort of part of our daily lives. For me, that might be kind of emails and sort of using my phones to sort of communicate. For my kids, it's about entertainment, and for SMB and small business organizations, it's about managing the business, whether it's their job schedules, paying invoices, collecting money from customers, and general business admin. But the unique thing with the telco is really the network and the backbone it provides to sort of enabling this connectivity. And as we've gone through evolution, mobile networks from 3G, 4G, and now 5G in fixed line, we're sort of at the fiber optic type of level and all the possibilities that brings. When we look at the lens of data and AI, there's a huge amount of trapped value here that I think is really optimum now for telcos to sort of tap into. And especially when you think about the sort of advances in things like 5G, meeting particularly IoT and the growth of billions of IoT sensors around the place, plus the power of sort of AI algorithms as they get more and more differentiated in there. And then when we bring in cloud and the possibilities of using edge and cloud services to do all of this thing, I think we're at a real sort of reset and a reinvention point for the telco industry.
So let's dive into that a little bit more and look at how the value of this network data is being unlocked right now. So my question to you, Kayur, is how can telcos use the same data that they've had for years in many cases since people started using smartphones and mobile phones? How can they use that data to make smarter decisions now?
Absolutely. And now network is so complicated. It's so many different parts of it. There's a backbone, there's a kind of radio element. And the amount of data generated on that just to sort of operate and run the network is huge. And I think the types of examples I'm thinking about is in terms of trapped value, there's a whole piece, if we call it the basics, around operating and managing this network. So you just get an improved service. Thousands of alarms that are being raised on the network. There's a lot of change that happens on a daily basis, configuration, optimization, performance changes. And all of this all these alarms are generated. And certainly the power of AI algorithms to sort of detect faults, predict faults in many cases, and almost take recovery actions before anybody has realized there's been a fault. And so we're really into that sort of realm of using AI to ultimately create a self-healing network. Now it's very much easier said than done. These networks, as I said, are complicated. They've grown sometimes through M&A and sort of various different activities but certainly that drive towards automation, which ultimately, as a consumer, what that means to me is that when I'm watching the Euros, I don't get a glitch, or when I'm trying to pay for something in a shop through my phone, the transaction goes through first time round, right? So it's really about using AI to sort of improve the service that consumers get at the end of it. But there's also other things. There's also other use cases that we're seeing more and more of at the moment. And a little bit more sort of on the innovation side, we know, we're working with telcos who are using drones and images to map their network. So, these drones are sort of capturing images of the kind of radio base stations, the towers, the things that we sort of see up and around in the street. And it's ultimately creating almost a digital twin, basically, of the network. And the image processing and the AI behind it can sort of identify components. It can help then sort of understand how much of your radio network is sort of, the mast is kind of populated, which components sit on it, where is there some empty space. And, when it comes out to rolling out new networks and sort of new equipment into that network, it shortcuts that whole process. You don't have to do as many surveys. You kind of know exactly which bit of equipment can fit on which bit of the network. And that whole process of building out the network becomes optimized. And that's a big process, right? That's billions and billions of investment that goes into building a network. So we see a huge amount of sort of trap value, like I say, right from the basics that kind of unlocks a bunch of sort of efficiency through to more innovative ways of actually planning and growing the network.
I want to come to Eddie in a second to dive into some practical examples of that. But before we do that, Kaya, I'm interested in your thoughts on how this is changing what telecoms companies do, how this understanding of the insights hidden in the data can help telcos transform into what you could call techcos. What do we mean when we talk about techcos?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's, a real sort of shift in the industry narrative, right, from sort of telco to techco. And I think, what does that mean? I guess it's a couple of things. I think the whole differentiator about owning the asset, the kind of network asset, isn't as big anymore, right? So you'll see a structural separation, and we're seeing a lot of this in Europe and in other parts of the world, where the telco is sort of separating kind of the network asset, and that's being spun off. The whole idea of we must own our network isn't necessarily as big a differentiator anymore. And certainly the move to cloud, and as networks become more virtualized, that's kind of plays into that. But then what does it mean? It then really means that the role of the telco is to become much more of a sort of service provider with more and more products and services. And I think that's kind of when we get into the term around techco. And it's going beyond sort of traditional connectivity, right? So today, telcos primarily are offering connectivity, and that will continue, but it's also going into using sort of the advantages of the network, as we sort of said, as IoT becomes a bigger thing, take smart metering. Most of us have now smart meters in our houses, or soon will have. We'll see a whole growth in the IoT sector. And I think from a telco perspective, what that means is the ability to provide differentiated services around industries. So, that could be in manufacturing, right, where they could be beyond connectivity, or it could be in autonomous vehicles, or even health. As we've seen, sort of healthcare is such a sort of growth area and a hugely more important area. And what the pandemic has shown us is the importance of data to collect within the healthcare industry to sort of help us guide and drive towards better treatments. So I think there's almost a set of kind of new products and services which can exist and be created, which will ultimately drive the move from telco to techco. And I guess what does that mean sort of from a behavior perspective and a product development cycle? It's also being far more open as an ecosystem, and having sort of ability to exchange data, having an ability to sort of exchange products and services, and really act much more like a technology company.
It's really, really fascinating stuff, and it's very, very challenging, I guess, for companies to do this seamlessly. So Eddie, let's talk about some specifics, if you don't mind. What have you learned at O2, Telefonica, and now Virgin Media O2 as it's gone through this data transformation process Kaya's just been talking about?
Yeah, I think it's Kaya's made some really important points. I think we probably didn't realize how sophisticated and how much data we had. I mean, Telefonica had been working on data monetization initiatives since about 2012. And when I arrived, we had a number of things which we bundled into what we called smart cities, and now we call O2 Motion, which are a set of products and services really about the fact that we have location information and location data. And so we'd be helping organizations, city planners, infrastructure planners, retail planners around here, movement of people. And that data has also been used for things like COVID planning. In 12 months ago, all the telcos were asked to provide their data looking at where people are going. And that's kind of just basic stuff, just selling insights off the data. We have, though, to Kaya's point now, started to look at more sophisticated data and you'd say AI to look at how we design our expansion of our 5G network. So today we have what we call a 5G non-standalone network and a 4G network and a 3G network. And in the future, we won't have the kind of full 5G capacity. We're using more AI-based models to actually design what's the optimum place to actually not place a cell tower, what's the right capacity, what's the right bandwidth to put in that infrastructure. Because the level of modeling is beyond what you'd say an individual human being can do. We've developed, much more sophisticated, we call it behavioral tribes, for example. So not just do you want the latest and greatest handset, but the types of person you are, what much more sophisticated attributes to get to truly what we might have talked about 25 years ago as one-to-one marketing. That much more personalized experience is important. And then take that data as what we've been doing now, as we've joined up all of our channels to be truly an omni-channel, next best offer, next best action, next best experience business for our customers. And as Kaya said, we need to be able to offer you a much wider sets of products and services, and that goes from the basics like to insurance type products, more accessories, not watches, AirPods, but also then say more sophisticated types of experiences. So where we get to as an example is what we're looking at now with 5G. We've been working with autonomous cars. We're looking at healthcare. Imagine a world where actually we're pretty much there now. But I drive an electric car. It happens to not be a Tesla. It's a Jaguar. And the problem is, if you're not a Tesla customer, is that at least 25 or 30 different charging networks, all requiring you to have a dongle, credit card, some kind of way to actually connect there. So in the way that we are, you've got your phone in the car. Maybe you're either going to the cinema now that lockdown's coming over, or you are returning to having some more business meetings. But you find that actually, if you're heading off to your meeting, you need to get charged up. Right. Well, the optimum charge of your car is actually probably maybe a mile and a half from your end meeting. So the GPS, we're connecting into the GPS, and in future to autonomous driving, we get you to the optimum charging network. We ensure we've connected through open banking to ensure that you've got credit on that charging network. We booked Uber for the last mile for you, and then reciprocate that process when you're meeting your cinema, whatever process. It's just a whole seamless where we are then becoming, as the network, the orchestrator. We don't have to provide the services. We're not trying to do a vertically integrated, but it's that coordinating service powered by our network and the data and AI to join it all up. That's kind of our vision. And bringing that together, that's one of the reasons we've joined with Virgin Media, because then we have a coverage of the entire UK. We've now got 47 million connections to houses in the UK and people. And we can be that kind of, you say, one of the central providers to people's lives, and offer a range of digital services like the one I've just talked about, which may be tightly coupled to the network or more loosely coupled as we expand.
I think that's a really, really fascinating picture of what Kaya was just talking about around this idea of techco and the companies being sort of hub of your digital and physical life, both from healthcare to autonomous cars and data-powered services. So to bring things back to a sort of more core place, what happens at a network level? How can this deeper understanding of network data and a move from telco to techco help build better networks, better connectivity?
Well, I think we've already seen, and Kyan talked about, Rakuten are the first people who've actually launched a completely virtual network. So yeah, I think they're not providing any of their own infrastructure. What we're doing, and we still see ourselves as an infrastructure provider. I mean, it's no secret, certainly in the UK, we have a partnership with Vodafone actually. So half the cell towers that we use are O2 ones, and likewise Vodafone use ours, and half of them are Vodafone towers, which we put our own kit in. So we've got a network sharing equipment from a kind of base station perspective, but then really what you're looking to do is optimize where you need your capacity. We have a lot of what you call hotspots. So what was the case certainly before lockdown, lots of places in city centres, and particularly where you've got high-rise buildings, you can get a lot of contention in the network. So you need additional capacity, you need the right capacity, you need the right bandwidth. And so one of the things we're looking at is optimizing the bandwidth we've got, as well as where the towers are, and actually then using our own location data and partnerships to look at where can we optimize to make sure that we have the least hotspots in our network. With lockdown, and as we're looking at staycations right now, for example, we're going to have to do some real-time pretty much upgrades, because effectively there's going to be massive demand for capacity at the UK seaside. So again, you're looking at using your AI to say, well, we can't physically run around and put in another 500 cell towers. How can we, again, optimize capacity and look at the bandwidth and the movement data we know, to really kind of look at where can we reduce those hotspots, where can we minimize, and that real-time response is kind of something that's really important. And again, in the past, you just used to get used to the idea that you go somewhere, suddenly you got 3G signal or no signal. That's not acceptable. People expect always on. So we've got to respond to that. And we call it the network customer experience. A lot of that is really powered by our data and our AI. And we've still got ways to go. I think our 5G standalone network will be the most sophisticated we've ever done. But we are using that in real time today to try to optimize the experience.
It's really, really fascinating how many insights there are to be gleaned from aggregate use of this data. Just things like the staycation example you used, I just find really, really fascinating that can have an impact on something that you don't even think about being a problem, because more people are taking holidays at home, you have this issue that you have to deal with, and it's really fascinating to listen to you talk about how that happens. Kayur, I wanted to kind of build on that a little bit and talk about trust and privacy. So we've been talking about large quantities of data, gleaning insights from it. That's always going to raise questions from consumers about privacy. So as telecoms companies move from telcos to techcos and they look to unlock the value in the data that they hold, what structures can we put in place to make sure it won't be misused?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because as you say, I think consumers are more aware than ever about sort of the importance of privacy and how their data is used. And that trend is only going to continue. And, from a regulation perspective, that's only going to get stronger and stronger. But I think in if I just reflect back in the last year, obviously living through a kind of sort of pandemic and working from home becoming very normal, and the reliance that we have on our connectivity services, it was interesting what Eddie was saying, where ultimately the telco pricing model, we're always getting more for less. And I was looking at my phone bill the other day and I was thinking, well, I basically pay about just over £1 a day for my mobile. But I mean, the value I get from having a mobile and everything I do on it is far outweighed than £1 a day. But anyway, I think as a side, just around coming back to the point about privacy and trust, is consumers really are going to become much more sort of demanding of this. We did a survey in Accenture last summer with the consumers and with B2Bs, and we found that I think 70% of consumers said their trust in their communication provider has increased. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And I think it goes back to our reliance, going back to almost this being such a sort of important service in our life. And I think it also reflects on the industry itself. I think there's always been a level of regulation. I think telcos have always had very long-standing relationships with their consumers. And I've certainly been with O2 as my mobile provider for many, many years, and so is the rest of my family. So I think a telco, and certainly working with Eddie and the guys inside, really they do value that long-standing relationship, and all the way from sort of product development through to sort of how we communicate with consumers. Trust, privacy, and appropriate communication is sort of at the heart of how a telco has already been thinking. And I think if you factor in the fact that they used to working in a regulatory environment and actually used to working with governments and regulatory authorities to sort of not just on the network side, but also more and more on how data is used and the products and services that come off it, I think a telco is probably very well placed. And certainly in the minds of a consumer, I'd say people will see a telco as having a very different approach to, say, the social media giants, right? And I think that is another unique factor in how we trust and how we build trust with our sort of telco providers.
You mentioned some of the tech giants there, the likes of Apple, Amazon, and Google have done a very good job at building ecosystems around their products and technologies. Apple is the quintessential example of how the phone in your hand, although it's really expensive, is almost a loss leader for them. They want you to subscribe to Apple TV or Apple Music or Apple iCloud storage, and it's a way to get your services their services into your hand. This is something that traditionally maybe telecoms companies have struggled to do to the same extent. Do you think this new approach, building on data and all the things that we've talked about so far, do you think that can help? Is that something that's going to change in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an essential approach. I mean, if we go back again through sort of, through the last few years or through many years, traditionally a telco has tried to sort of launch these products themselves by doing it themselves. And it's been I guess some people have described it as a bit of a closed wall type of approach. And the idea was to sort of get a competitive advantage. So, how do you differentiate between your telcos? Well, you try and differentiate through products and services. And we've seen so many attempts in the industry where if all the telcos have sort of tried, whether it's mobile advertising or building a mobile wallet with mobile payment capabilities, or even sort of health apps and things like that. Telcos traditionally tried to do it almost themselves all the way through, with that sort of closed approach. But I think as as time has kind of moved, and certainly there's a very wide acceptance that now the approach is about partnering, is about an open ecosystem, and that will have to reflect in sort of the way products and services are designed, the way technology is designed. So you've got sort of real avenues to exchange data, to exchange products and services, and almost build platforms that other people can build products and services for you. And then you're using telco connectivity. You may be using other aspects that a telco has, whether it's a B2B field force and workforce to go out and sell products and services, or a maintenance team that actually supports and operates these things. So there's a real need here, or a real opportunity to kind of take a smaller part of the pie, but across many products and services, rather than try and take the whole pie itself.
Do you think we'll see greater collaboration? I think this is probably a question for both of you. Do you think we'll see greater collaboration between telcos to bring these products to market?
I think that's a distinct possibility. I mean, I think in terms of how, certainly as I use the example, I think we need to be in that position where we're not vertically integrated, trying to do everything ourselves. And we do need, I'd say, partnerships to cover, you'd say, provide global coverage. So with the challenge for telcos is that well, at one level we've clearly got partnerships for roaming, because no telco now has got coverage of more than about, say, 20-25% of the globe, really, in terms of particularly in terms of people. So we do need those partnerships to make it work. And likewise, I think in order to make the kind of services that I'm talking about work, you need partnerships with automotive, with healthcare, with financial services, and that's a big, I think, that we've got to get right if we're going to be successful.
And I mean, what I would add to that is that as Eddie says, there's clearly been a history of sort of collaboration, particularly around the network and roaming and things like that. I'd probably also add we'll see a bit more around M&A, a bit like we've done with O2 and Virgin Media, right? So the sort of the right partners coming together to ultimately scale and join forces and bring different parts of the network and different parts of the proposition together as well.
There's some really interesting conversations going on, I think mainly in the US, around things like net neutrality and the role telecoms providers and connectivity providers have to play in providing services to companies. I think that's less of an issue here, so probably not one to get into right now. So I want to end, Eddie, with a question to you, and you touched on this earlier. For consumers that may be unaware of these changes happening behind the scenes with telecom companies moving into being techcos, what impact is this going to have on their day-to-day lives? You mentioned that, the electric car charging analogy from earlier. So what would that look like in the future? How will that change in the future? And how could this seamless telco, techco change make life more seamless for consumers at that very, very consumer-focused end of things?
Yeah, well, I think probably it's kind of a double-edged sword. The question is, can we as a telco be one of those ubiquitous digital techcos? I mean, and that's clearly the ambition for Virgin Media too, because you'd say Apple, Google, Amazon, they're already there. So and their first, second, and third source of competitive advantage is data. I think people have become a bit more savvy to the idea that, particularly with the Google and Facebook, we are giving away a huge amount of data, and we are the product. But they will do that because they get a lot of services for free. I think for us, basically it's kind of, we have a concept today of a custom plan, which is basically you can get a whole bunch of services on a contract. We provide that with interest-free credit over a period of time, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And I think to that point, people would like to buy more of those kind of bundled services. And I think from a vendor you can trust. And I think with us, we've clearly got a lot of heritage in the O2 brand, and then with the Virgin Media brand, those are trusted brands. And we want to build that. It's that trusted relationship that Kai talked about earlier. We kind of build that trusted relationship with somebody who can provide you a lot more than just, quotes, an invisible infrastructure, and make that easy for you, easy to pay for, but actually demonstrate that there's value for money. That's all part of that ongoing relationship. And yeah, we have got the benefit that Kay said earlier. Kind of many of our customers have been with us for 10 or more years, and so as we expand what we do, we're doing that in a more, you'd say, not land grab, but just trying to incrementally build that in a way that people will trust. And if we've got that trusted long-term relationship, I think we've got a sustainable view for growth and a sustainable partnership with our customers, which they will they value and want to continue.
Kaya, if you can give us a sense of your vision for the future, so maybe picking up on what Eddie was just talking about, but also perhaps some of the hurdles that we'll need to overcome to get to that point. That seamless integration is great, but what will telcos have to do, and what will consumers have to do for that world to be brought into reality?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Eddie laid out the vision quite well. And I think it's, as a consumer of these sorts of services, I can see this happening. I just look at how much my life has changed in the last 5 years in terms of the types of services I'm consuming on my mobile phone or my iPads, or how I watch TV at home, for example. So I think the vision is going to get there. I think in terms of hurdles, obviously making this sort of shift for any kind of company is not easy. And and our sort of telco clients, including O2 and Virgin Media and a lot of other telco clients, these are big organizations and complicated organizations. So there's a piece about how do you move with speed, because the window of opportunity and the window to sort of reset and reinvent, there is a window basically. So I think a lot of it's going to be around how do you sort of move the organization to respond to these kind of growing consumer demands, but do it at pace. I think also the concept of being much more open as an ecosystem and allowing access to the network, the connectivity to the data in an exchange in a secure and safe manner is not an easy one to get around. I think we'll see more and more regulation coming in. We've heard recently from the EU as well. So we'll see much more regulation coming in, and that has to get navigated. And so there's a natural barrier to try and slow down some things as well. And then of course the competitive pressure, right? So we've talked about the sort of tech giants today with the likes of obviously Facebook and Google and everybody else and Apple have historically sort of played over the top, and they'll obviously continue with that cycle of innovation. So I think that it just makes it even more important for it to sort of become much more of an ecosystem. And I think Eddie used a good word, right? I think the telco is in a unique place to orchestrate through that, but it's not totally straightforward.
Eddie, I'm interested in almost the logistics of when you merge these kind of big telecoms companies, how much time and effort it takes to get the data into a place where it's ready to do all this stuff that we've talked about, to work on the AI and to glean insights, and how much of it is just physically trying to integrate these two different systems into one, and whether technology can help play a role in that as well.
Well, yeah, I think it's been the rule of thumb on data and analytics and AI for the last 25 years that 80% of the work's still on manipulating the data, and 20% of it's actually adding value to it with and I think that's still true. I mean, in the context of Virgin Media O2, I mean, it was just over a year ago that the shareholders announced plan to merge, and we established a clean team many months ago, starting to look at the opportunities. The reality is, in terms of looking at real data and actually really sharing and mapping it, we only started that in the last few weeks. And we've been conceptually what we can do around cross-sell, upsell, and other capabilities, and pre-merger integration. But the reality is, post-merger integration is where it's at. And you say traditionally it would take us 3 to 5 years to really fully integrate these companies. Now with things like data virtualization technologies, cloud-based technologies, we've got to at least get you'd say 80% of the way there in the next 6 to 12 months. It's expected. So, and that's central to our plans, because we want to be able to give the full experience of what we call the supercharged experience of Virgin Media and O2 together to our customers as soon as possible. So that's where we're at. Still can't tell you how we did it, because we're still doing it.
I want to just finally flip back to the consumer side. And I guess from a consumer point of view, it's quite an interesting time, because we've got all these regulations coming in around data portability, and it's going to be easier than ever to switch networks and to get your data off one platform to another platform, whether that's a social media company or a telecoms provider. So it's almost on the telco to give people value for their data, in a sense, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I think end of contract notifications came in a year ago, and it's like previously people, we had a situation, and we saw it in some of our competitors. The people were out of contract for months, if not years, and actually in certain cases were still being charged not just for the network, but even for the handset part of their contract. So we stopped that years ago. But it is beholden to us to be able to basically make it a seamless experience on a one-to-one basis to effectively migrate you off our network onto somebody else's, and we effectively give what we call a pack code, so somebody can literally do that very straightforwardly. So portability is really important to us, and it's equally obviously a massive risk for us compared to what we've been in the world before. But then it just shows again how important data is to us in terms of driving our competitive advantage and just maximizing our customer experience. And that's what it's in at the heart of us, is trying to deliver the next best customer experience.
I think that's just about brings us to the end of our time. So I wanted to say thank you so much to Eddie and to Kaya for your time today and for sharing your insights. It's been really fascinating. If you enjoyed the session, please do check out our next episode in the series. You can find out more information on wired.co.uk. I just wanted to say a final thank you to Eddie and Kaya, and to everyone for watching the session. Thank you, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, guys.